Okay, so here's another GCC case study, the Choco rainforest. This one is from the Living World. It's on the causes and impacts of deforestation. Make sure you can divide your notes between causes and impacts. What the AQA says is that the causes are very specific. Subsistence and commercial farming, so that's people farming for their own needs, and people making money by selling the produce. So it might be palm oil in terms of large plantations, or it might be specialist things like mangoes. Logging, which is commercially removing wood. Obviously, road building, which destroys large tracts of forest, but in fact is economically advantageous. Mineral extraction, energy development, things like HEP, which of course takes a lot of land up, settlement for people, and of course that's driven by population growth because it links the demographic transition model and the fact that populations are growing. The impacts, of course, remember your sheep factors, economic, environmental, political, social, put them together the right way, of course, Mr. Williams, they go social, historical, economic, environmental, and political. Two big ones are the economic advantages versus the environmental impacts. But the really clever geographer is able to find the positives and the negatives for both the environment and for the economics. And the politics, of course, think scale. Local politics of people need to find a living, national politics that they vote for their government, international politics where people, for example, in the West don't think deforestation should occur and try and stop what's going on, but the people in those areas, they need to live somehow. So you've got quite a lot of that aspects for this particular case study. Okay, here's the Choco rainforest. So we're on the Pacific Rim. Big, massive creatures coming out of the core, being destroyed. No. The Pacific Rim, they're the Galapagos Islands. And here you've got what is a coastal wet for tropical forest. And you can see here, coastal tropical forest, very, very diverse habitat, lots of niche conditions. Many of these things of the species are only found there, endemic, only found in that region. About 11,000 things, amphibians, including 210 as endemic. So it's quite a pristine environment. So you think that the world in general, big scale, would want to protect it. So people like the WWF, not the Wrestling Federation, but the World Wildlife Fund, are very interested in saving the Choco rainforest. But the local people and the national governments have got their own needs. Local people need to survive. National government needs to pay off debt because this is an LIC, or a forest that covers 3 LICs, Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru, with Panama just at the northern tip. Therefore, what do we look at in terms of the causes? Palm oil, main threat. This is the main threat. Big areas of the landscape destroyed to make way for planting just palm oil, a monocrop. Fewer species are going to be able to survive there because you've only got one basis of what's growing. Your palm oil is growing, and therefore only those species that are adapted to the food webs that go around palm oil will survive. So you won't have your lianas and your emergent trees or anything like that. Fuel wood, people need to burn fuel to cook. Fuel wood is a really big need. So that's a local subsistence need. Okay, palm oil commercial, fuel wood local need. Logging, commercial, big trees like mahogany are used for high-end furniture. So of course that earns export dollars because when a company exports something from a country, the government will tax it. So it's not just a simple stop logging. What are you going to do? You're going to give the government some money so they don't have to do logging? Gold mining is very, very, very damaging because to extract the gold from the water, you may have seen guys in the Yukon panning for gold. They had mercury because the mercury binds the bits of gold together and therefore they sit in the settlement pans. The problem is that mercury then washes into the ecosystem and does irreparable damage because it's very, very toxic, which is why you can't play with it in your chemistry lessons. Infrastructure, these countries want to grow, then develop, and they need the roads, they need the power plants, they need things like that. The problem with that economic development needing the infrastructure is the environment gets destroyed. And I've mentioned already the 2 types of farming. Penultimately, we've got oil exploration because, of course, oil is another resource to extract, but you take oil out of the ground, you're going to damage the forest and you're going to destroy the environment. But again, economic advantages. Except, of course, if the oil company is overseas based, the profits will not be felt by the countries that are actually hosting the oil at the moment. And then finally, growing population pressure. These countries have still got a high birth rate, but the death rates come down already because they've been able to take advantage of the same medicines and advantages that we've had, and they're able to access a better standard of nutrition. So the impacts, social, environmental, economic, by now you'll have got them. But what I suggest you do is you make sure you note, for example, the Embera is an indigenous group that are affected by the destruction of the Choco rainforest. Young people migrating to cities. Okay, so you get a social breakup because, of course, there's no social services out in these forested areas. The older people are looked after by the younger people. But if the younger people move out, what's going to happen? Are you going to end up with areas with no population? That means there'll be no one to defend those areas, which means the dark forces of causation of logging and everything else might be able to get in there because the political pressure to look after the people locally may have dropped. Economic, Big exports creates jobs, and therefore you get the local and regional multiplier effect. If you drop the multiplier effect bomb, examiners will see it, they'll give you credit. And finally, we kind of said it already, reduce biodiversity, fewer species, increase soil erosion because you take away the canopy and the rain just hits the ground and washes it away, destruction of ecosystems, and of course we're reducing rainforest, which is a natural sink of carbon dioxide. So there will be a global scale additional impact into global warming. There's a couple of exam questions for you to have a go at. They're the only ones that we can find around there. The one that bothers me most is the international organizations business. Bear in mind, international organizations can use things such as sustainable tourism, so you can have commercial groups that actually can be a benefit, because sustainable tourism means that people actually are able to make money by having visitors coming and paying a lot because it is pristine rainforest. Try and balance your pros and your cons. And finally, have a look on Kahoot, have a look for a search. Good luck.